Good morning, everyone, to another edition of MHQ's Foundation 101 podcast, where by popular demand and due to our practice, we are going back into real estate, everyone's favorite investment commodity. And we already held such a podcast earlier on this year, and we will, of course, link it to the one from today. But because of the number of questions that we have received in the meantime and practices that we have been doing, we thought it would be relevant to have Kat Zagati back on the pod. Kat, good morning.
Good morning.
And this podcast is meant to answer another round of FAQ on the topic. So as we discussed with, we want to talk about procedure, we want to talk about transfer fees, we want to talk about different registrars. Is there different registrars? And as well as financing and refinancing. So without further ado, let's jump into this. How many registrar of properties is there today in the Emirate of Dubai?
Okay, so Dubai counts with two different property registers, the Dubai Land Department, or the DLD, and the DIFC Register of Real Property. The DLD is responsible for registering all properties in the Emirate of Dubai, except for properties located within the DIFC area, which fall under the jurisdiction of the DIFC Register.
So two different registrars for different zone, and within each zone, presumably there are different type of property rights, correct?
Yes. Correct. So one can have, for instance, a freehold, which means full ownership of the property. There's also leasehold or usufruct, which means the right to use a property for up to 99 years without changing the original conditions of this property. Also, we have musataha, which means the right to own, build, and use a property for a period of up to 50 years. And granted lands, which means lands that are granted by the sheikh, usually to a UAE national, so that he can develop this land for residential, commercial, or industrial purposes. This property right, however, is not a freehold and is subject to certain restrictions. For instance, the property cannot be sold without a special approval from the sheikh, or unless the UAE national pays certain fees to convert this granted land into a freehold property. Also, it's important to mention here that there are different types of areas in Dubai. We have the freehold area and the non-freehold area. In the non-freehold area, only UAE and GCC nationals can own a property, whereas in the freehold areas, all nationalities, of course, including UAE and GCC nationals, can own properties there.
Okay, clear. So now we have the big picture. How do these two registrars function? Are they completely identical or they have dissimilarities?
Okay, so the procedures and fees involved in a property transfer with the DLD and the DIFC register are slightly different. As you will see in this comparative chart, the DLD applies a standard transfer fee of 4% of the market value of the property, whereas the DIFC register applies a standard fee of 5%.
That's a DIFC premium for you, right?
That's right. But that said, there are some exemptions that I'm going to be explaining to you now. So the DLD has the concept of gifting fees, which means 0.125% of the market value of the property, as opposed to 4%. This gifting fee applies to transfers of properties involving immediate family members, for instance, parents, children, and spouses, and also applies to transfers or restructuring involving the same beneficial owner. The DIFC register, on the other hand, considers a transfer or a restructuring as internal if it involves the same beneficial owners. And in this case, no transfer fee is applied by the DIFC register, but only administrative charges.
Okay.
Also, differently from the DLD, the DIFC register does not deem internal transfer a transfer of property between immediate family members. And in this case, the DIFC register will apply 5% transfer fees. In terms of procedures, a property transfer in the DIFC is completed remotely through the DIFC online portal, whereas the DLD requires the presence of the buyer and the seller or their representatives in front of one of the registration trustee offices.
Okay, clear. So DIFC very modern, and clearly we would expect the DLD to lean towards that way in due course, like most of the corporate registrars in the UAE these days. Now, the big questions for you is, do both registrars today accept properties being held by a foundation, whether directly or indirectly?
Yes, both registers accept foundations as direct or indirect owner of properties in Dubai.
So that's a good news. So now let's look at how this works in practice, and let's run us through a couple of examples that you have picked from our recent practice.
Okay, perfect. So as you will see in our first example, we have an individual, Mr. X, who is owning this property, and he wishes to transfer this property to the IFC Foundation that he set up, and he was appointed as founder and initial beneficiary
Yes.
of the DIFC Foundation. So in this scenario, if the property is registered with the DLD will apply gifting fees. And if the property is registered with the DIFC will not apply any fees because this will be deemed as an internal transfer.
So clearly there is a huge incentive here to restructure in that case, because it's not like, oh, I need to pass this huge hurdle and pay again. It's like, oh, I pay very little to increase my position much more in terms of legacy planning, consolidation, asset protection. Yeah.
Yes, perfect. And one thing that I should stress here, that the reason why the DLD and the DIFC treat these transfers as gifting or internal transfer, it's because Mr. X, which was owning the property directly, remains the beneficial owner of the property, but now through a DIFC foundation. So that's important for us to understand. Now, the second example we have here in front of us, we still have Mr. X, but now he's holding a JAFSA entity, okay, which itself holds this property, and he wants to transfer the property to a DIFC prescribed company that he set up, which is itself held by a DIFC foundation. And again, he's the founder and the beneficiary of this foundation. So the scenario is exactly the same. DLD will apply gifting fees, and the DIFC will apply zero fees, actually, just administrative fees, as this will be deemed as an internal transfer.
So that's, again, a very good news, because if one wants to get rid of a structure which is not exactly, how to put it, modern and sophisticated, you can go to something in the DIFC which costs a bag of chips, but is super sophisticated and very versatile in the prescribed company. Now, what if someone has a JAFSA, has a couple of properties under it, and says, look, I want to keep that. I do not want the hassle of conveyancing everything. Can you help?
Yes, of course. So this will be our next example here. So if you have the JAFSA and you want to transfer the shares in this entity as opposed to the property itself, then it's the same scenario. Again, Mr. X is the founder and the beneficiary of this foundation. So the DLD will see this transfer as a gifting, and the DIFC will see this as an internal transfer. Same gifting fees or zero fees for the DIFC will apply.
This sounds too good to be true. So give me an example where actually there is a huge difference between both registrars.
Yes. Okay. So in case Mr. X wishes to transfer his property into a foundation where his son is the founder and the beneficiary, then we have two different scenarios. If the property is registered with the DLD will see this as a gifting procedure, as the DLD recognize gifting for transfers between immediate family members. However, the DIFC, on the other hand, does not recognize that. So if this property is located in the DIFC, 5% fees will apply.
Yeah. And maybe I step in here by twisting this example somewhat, because if Mr. X wants to settle this on a foundation that has been set up by his brother, then you would still have the 5% in the AFC, but lo and behold, it will be 4% at the land department. So the definition of family member is paramount at the DLD, and it is reasonably restrictive. So you better watch out when you actually do the transfer. We've seen some families, poorly advised as it turned out, that were tackled with a 2 times transfer fee, first time to a DIFC holding, and then putting onto a foundation. So they could have waited and done it at that time, only one time, and saved themselves a bunch of money. So there you go. Now, let's go back to this one, your last example.
Yes, my last example is in case, for instance, Mr. X would like to transfer the shares in the JAFSA entity into a foundation where Mr. Z, which is, for instance, not related to him, is the founder and the beneficiary. So in this case, as you said, the DIFC and the DLD will see this transfer as a standard transfer. So 4% will be applicable for the DLD and 5% for the DIFC.
All right. And a lot of these people will have mortgages or will consider mortgaging. What is the law of the land today? And can a mortgage property be transferred, respectively? Can a property under a foundation be mortgaged today?
Yes, so mortgaged properties or properties to be mortgaged can also be transferred to a foundation as long as the bank accepts mortgaging or remortgaging this property in favor of the foundation. This is actually becoming very common lately due to the increase in the number of private and retail banks being willing to accept mortgaging properties in favor of foundations.
Yeah, that's good
So,
news. Not
yeah,
everyone is still aligned on that.
yeah.
So we see big discrepancies. So if you want to know who is on and who is out, just give us a shout. But trust me, the banks that are on, they are capitalizing on this big time, getting new clients, getting new assets under management for private banks. So it's wonderful to see actually this being some people jumping on this opportunity to do business and help their clients. It's as simple as that. What about the cost of registering or re-registering this mortgage, Kat?
Okay, so the fees for mortgaging a property with the DLD are 0.25% of the mortgaged amount. And this is added to administrative fees, which is around 6,000 dirhams. This for the DLD, and the DIFC does not charge any fees for mortgaging the property, but again, only administrative charges, which would amount to 600 dirhams only.
Wow, the DFC generous
Yeah.
these days. That's very
Yeah.
good. And maybe I'll finish on that. You mentioned a lot throughout these examples. DFC Foundation, would that not be possible if we were talking about Dubai real estate to have an ADGM Foundation? Would that not work today?
As of today, the DLD is not yet accepting the IFC Foundation as a direct or indirect owner of properties in Dubai yet.
Okay, and we may or may not have tricked a couple in the early days, but yeah, that is the current practice. So buyer beware. Today, if you want to buy real estate in Dubai, you have to have a DIFC foundation. That's fine, but it is likely to change over time with ADGM and Ras Al Khaimah Foundation being able to invite themselves to the party. But as of today, in terms of practice, this is it. Go DIFC. And that's fine. The price is the same everywhere, at least if you come with MHQ. Okay, Kat, this was fantastic. Thank you very much. We will do a small write-up, of course, and we'll share with our people. And probably we'll hop on a new podcast in a couple of weeks because clearly this is a hot topic, if not the hot topic. And we expect that to continue in 2021. Next week, another hot topic for every entrepreneur is how you actually can work between foundation and universal life solution. And as it turned out, and we will find out, they are very, very compatible and can work in conjunction for the better good of business people and their family. We'll talk about this with no one else than Ashok Sardana from Continental. Kat, thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.